I believe intelligence agencies around the world often work through proxies and local assets, or maybe criminal networks as well, in the hostile territories. And how important are such networks in covert operations, especially in countries where official presence is impossible? I mean, close to impossible sometimes. I have heard stories of the people whom I cannot mention the name, of course, on the podcast, who were a part of the families who went as a part of the Indian delegation to Islamabad. We had like High Commission over there. I don't know whether it's still operating though, because it's a long time back, and they have had experience that like people are following them. Things are primarily happening in a way that because I think embassies are generally used as a kind of a deep cover as well for some of the agency operations as well. So in country like Pakistan, which is like most of our India security budget goes on that, how do you basically carry out covert operations by having an official presence there?
Well, you are right about both these things. One being that most intelligence agencies tend to adopt diplomatic covers, right? The embassies are the basis of intelligence operations, where you have intelligence officers posted on diplomatic covers, and quite naturally,
Yeah.
because if you're caught, then you have the Geneva Convention to protect you. You're only declared persona non grata and sent back, right? So you have diplomatic immunity. You cannot be arrested. You cannot be mistreated. But obviously, Pakistan does not adhere to all these kind of conventions. And to be honest, even India doesn't. The IB doesn't give a very good time to Pakistani intelligence officers or diplomats posted in Delhi. So it's kind of mutual, though I wouldn't say that
Yeah.
they're as bad as how Pakistan treats Indian diplomats. So you see, two
Yeah.
things have, there are two factors here, right? Firstly, as you mentioned, it's about diplomatic presence, right? Over the years, what you have seen, for example, let's take the Russia-Ukraine war. What happened as the Russia-Ukraine war was beginning? You had all the Russian diplomats being expelled from European countries, from North American countries, and so on. So in one go, Russia has lost its presence in these countries. There are no more diplomats here. So conducting intelligence activities based from
Yes.
the Russian embassy becomes very difficult. So what do you do in that instance? So then you reach out to anybody possible, right? And that's where this nexus builds with criminal organizations or other kind of private individuals, right? So you are right to that extent when you say that lack of presence then leads to these kind of nexus building up. But then there's a second factor. These are state to state problems that we're talking about. But when you're talking about counterterrorism, you're talking about terrorist organizations. They, it's very difficult to monitor them being based in an embassy, right, or in a high commission. And terrorist groups per se, they are very hierarchical and close knit groups, right? So even infiltrating a terrorist group becomes extremely, extremely difficult. Yeah, you can manage to plant a spy in another country's embassy. There's so many embassy staff and so on. But infiltrating a terrorist group becomes highly difficult, and even if you manage to do so, communication becomes even more difficult, right? And terrorist groups are, they're just groups with certain political agendas. So what is Al Qaeda fighting for? They're fighting for the establishment of an Islamic State, and same goes with ISIS or any other organization. Beyond that kind of a political agenda, the will to carry out that, to fight for that political agenda, they don't really have the operational and logistical support necessary to carry out terrorist attacks, to sustain themselves. And so what they do is they build ties with criminal organizations. Now, when you're talking about organized criminal groups, they are transnational in character. So they have infrastructure cutting across borders, they have manpower, they have financial networks, and so on and so forth, which the terrorist groups, then intend to exploit. And that's why you have this term called crime terror nexus. And this crime terror nexus, as much as it is operationally useful for terrorist groups, it's also useful, it presents useful opportunity for intelligence agencies. Because the intelligence agencies cannot infiltrate the terrorist groups by themselves, now they see an opportunity with these criminal gangs. Now, as I was already telling you, this is a competitive space where murder for hire, or murder is quite par for the course. Nobody's going to be talking about it's not going to raise suspicions that one gang member bumped off another gang member, right? So that creates opportunities for intelligence agencies as well. So that is why when you're talking about crime terror nexus, the larger picture shows you that it is crime terror intelligence nexus. So that's the second reason why you see these kind of collaborations and having proxies and so on. And the third thing today is that with the emergence of round the clock surveillance technologies and the coming of internet where it is very difficult to create a myth or a cover. It's not entirely impossible, but it's difficult. So in this day and age, it's far more easier to hire somebody to, carry out an odd attack rather than, going through this lengthy and tedious procedure of, adopting a cover, infiltrating yourself into an enemy country, making it all the way to where a terrorist organization is based out, and then, so it makes life more difficult. And also one of the things that I forgot to mention when you asked me about the operational steps that need to be taken while planning is that even after you've done everything, right, you've rehearsed your operations and so on, there is no guarantee that on the final day your target will be where you expect him or her to be, right? So until the last moment
Yes,
you need to be sure whether they're there or
that is
not,
for
right?
sure.
So till the last moment there's so much that goes into it, and so it doesn't really make much sense to have one of our own operative to go in and carry out an attack if it is much
Very
more
true.
easier to simply hire somebody and pay them off to get the job done. So which is why you see from both an operational point of view and also just the way the nature of intelligence business is changing, you see a lot of these proxies, not proxies, but collaborations with criminal groups, organized criminal groups, and intelligence agencies and terrorist groups developing. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is very true. The one that you mentioned about the final target, you won't find him there or her, maybe uh, that, like, the uncertainty always looms in the operation. That's what I also believe, that looking at all the research, I think uncertainty is a factor. Like, in I think the space industry, we say while launching the satellites, the uncertainty always looms in whether the satellite will explode or not. So, so I think it's the same for the intelligence operations as well. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.